Hello, I'm Mark Richardson from the Globe and Mail. I'm here with Venkat Sumantran. He is, well, ostensibly the chairman of CELERIS Technologies, but I think the really interesting thing about you at the moment is you're also a book author. Faster, Smarter, Greener. You want to tell me a little bit about this book? Because this sounds pretty intriguing. Faster and smarter and greener.
Well, I mean, yes, particularly in the context of where we are at Movin'On. After spending 30 years in the auto industry, there was this natural curiosity to think about where is the industry going, where's society going with mobility. And rather than just set off to write a book, I decided it would be appropriate to do it with a very highly reputed university. So this is a book we did with the MIT in the US, along with two colleague professors who are co-authors of mine with the book.
Okay.
The book started to explore the dimensions of change that we will have with mobility. We have seen the auto industry today talk about 4 critical pillars of change. They call it CASE. It's connected, it's autonomous, it's shared, and it's electrified. But that still talks about the car and manifestations and ways of use of the car. But when we started to look around the world and we saw cities as different as Tokyo, from Shanghai to London to New York and Los Angeles, we began to see that the mobility landscape is actually far richer than the limits of what a case-equipped auto sector could deliver. So we started to look at mobility as a whole. Once you started to look at mobility as a whole, you realize that you can't think of mobility divorced from the actual context where it should play. The context is cities and how people would use mobility in cities. And of course, we all realize that cities are different. They have different topology, they have different affordability for the population, they have different spreads, different congestion or different density of packing. So we came to realize that this is going to be a much more complicated assessment of how would you deliver the appropriate mobility architecture for any city suitable for the kinds of priorities that the citizens or the residents of that city would have.
Well, let me ask you here then. Are you looking at cities globally around the world, or are you just looking at North America or at Europe? Because it's very different, right? Obviously.
Absolutely. No, we deliberately set out to write a book that would have global appeal, recognizing that when you look at Asia, for instance, cities like Singapore and Tokyo are not only housing very large populations each with very high population densities, they've also gone quite far in adapting their mobility architecture to this environment. And if you consider that globally, we are seeing no matter where you are in the world, urbanization is happening at a remarkably fast pace. It's very interesting. People, it sometimes just goes by us that we don't realize this. In 1900, 1 out of every 6 persons in the world was urban. By 2000, 3 out of every 6 was urban.
Really?
And by 2050, we expect 4 out of every 6 is going to be urban. So this urbanization is a global concept. It's happening globally, and it's going to very fundamentally change not just what's happening in high density Asian cities, but it's going to be a problem that cities around the world are going to have to deal with. Very high populations in relatively limited spaces.
And cities and cars don't go together very well, do they?
Well, the classical example, of course, is Los Angeles, a city that was built around the car. And I think Los Angeles, they've tried very hard to create an architecture that's suited to the car, but they're beginning to realize that no matter what they do, they can't keep pace. Los Angeles as a city has the highest number of road lanes per population. It has the largest road surface area, and the widest road network amongst any large major US city.
It's a concrete city if you go there, right?
And it has the worst congestion and the worst air quality. And no matter how many new highways and flyovers they build, it seems to reach saturation. So clearly, a mobility architecture that is going to suit very large populations has to be reconfigured. And cities, we see particularly European cities, or even for that matter, New York and Manhattan, have had to deal with this reality of much higher density of packing human beings. It sounds rather unpleasant, but on the other hand, people want to be in cities. There is an
They're moving there, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, does your book offer solutions? Does it offer suggestions?
Yes, we evolved a framework that we believe is going to be useful for cities around the world to adapt to configure what's right for them. In saying this, what we mean is, given that the cities are different with respect to their nature and as well the affordability for the populations, what is affordable in Jakarta is not an affordable solution in New Delhi, or for that matter in London. So we had to create a framework that we felt could be something that each city could use, but construct essentially their own architecture. And the framework for us had four what I would call orthogonal dimensions. It starts with heterogeneity. When we think of mobility modes, the conventional idea used to be you have a personal car, there's a public bus, and then you have a metro rail. But today, that discrete spectrum has been broken up into so many different options. We've got micro-mobility coming in, we've got scooters running on pavements, we've got e-bikes, and all the way this continuum spreads all the way to buses and bus rapid transit and tramways and light rail and metro rail.
That's what they call the last mile, is that not right?
Well, literally the metro rails or the buses could get you to where you want among the major routes, and then you need last mile connections from this. And
that's when you get on your scooter and stuff, right?
Could be.
Yeah.
It could be a bicycle, it could be, so you've got but the main point we wanted to make is that this heterogeneity gives cities a larger number of options that they can tailor to their climatic conditions, they can tailor to their affordability spectrum and so on. For instance, even in a city like Copenhagen, where 45% of the people bike to work, they're happy biking to work even on a snow-covered day. And when when it's snowing, the snow plows first clear the bike lanes, and then the car lanes. And so it's a city that says, we will work with bikes no matter what the season. So this managing and leveraging and using this heterogeneity gives us a lot more options than we might have had 20 years ago.
Right, but there are still challenges for some cities. Like you mentioned Copenhagen, which does get some snow in the wintertime. And I'm immediately thinking, here we are in Montreal. Can you ever persuade people in Montreal, which has nothing but hills and nothing but 8 months of snow, for people here to ride their bicycles year round? I don't know that you can.
Well, there's one part of it we will come to later, which has to do with policies and regulations. But the other part of it is gradients are today greatly helped with the kinds of e-bikes that we see out here.
True. Yeah.
So e-bikes are beginning to proliferate in many parts of the world, and all of a sudden, what seemed like a grade doesn't seem so intimidating anymore. So, yes. So we continue to believe that innovation will further provide greater heterogeneity and therefore many options. Now, once you have all these options, you need to connect them, because you want to get from A to B, and you want to, if necessary, use multiple modes to get there, and making sure that it meets your requirements of what you want to do with the journey. Connectivity today, we believe, which is the second of the themes, is enabled by the digital tools we have and the physical infrastructure we're building. In the old days, it used to be I would land at the Frankfurt International Airport, and 10 minutes later I'm in a train going to Düsseldorf. It's such a convenient hub. Connectivity was achieved with physical infrastructure. Today, apart from the physical infrastructure, which could be even something as simple as a bike rack, an e-bike, a hiring bike rack outside of a metro station, it could be digital connectivity. London has experimented with things like the Oyster Card and now contactless payments. that basically means that you come out of one mode and get onto the second mode with the minimum amount of fuss, minimum amount of effort and trouble.
Can you tell me what an Oyster Card is?
Well, the Oyster Card is literally a multimodal payment card
Right.
that's loaded with money, and within the
Loaded with your money.
with your money, and within the Transport for London framework, you can use that card to go on a bus, take the underground, rent an e-bike, rent a car to go, or a
Sure.
electric vehicle to go from one part of the city to the other, even the riverboat service.
So if it's working in London, why isn't it everywhere already?
It's beginning to prop up in many other parts of the world. Singapore has it, Hong Kong has it, and I know, for instance, several cities in India have started to issue multimodal travel cards.
Are
These
they popular? Do
they
people
are.
want them?
They are, and you can, you've got mechanisms to even make them popular. For instance, you load cards and you make sure that because the transit authority saves money by not manning, cashier booths and so on, they give you discounts. So you say, you buy $50 of, you load your card with $50 and you got $80 of travel benefits. So this is the second dimension of connectivity. Digital tools, smartphones, smart cards, coupled with the physical infrastructure. When you have all of this, the heterogeneity and the multiple modes of connecting things, you can have infinite options. And it's intimidating to even wade through the data to say, if I want to go from A to B, how do I make sense with all this data?
I'd like my phone to just tell me, Mark, this is what we suggest you do. Hey Siri, how should I get to there? Mark, do this. Will it do that? Are you working on
There
that?
are systems that are doing it today.
Really?
There are systems in Europe. I have an app that I use in Europe, and it is capable of synthesizing a journey across travel service providers. So not only will it tell me that I can take a bicycle or a metro to the nearest railway station, it books a seat for me on Deutsche Bahn on the railway.
Right.
And so it essentially helps take care of the entire journey from one end to the other.
Well, this is all a great idea, but it's a question of making it actually work. I drove here today to this center in Montreal in a car, and I couldn't type in the address to the GPS of the car because it didn't recognize the address. So I used the GPS thing on my Google Maps, and I had Siri talk me through, and then somewhere along the way, Siri told me that I should turn north up here. And you know what? Suddenly I'm lost in Montreal in the roadworks. It was terrible. So it sounds good, but it's not there yet. So how close are we to all of this actually happening?
I mean, we all know in the world of data and smartphone capability, what we have this year is significantly better than what we had last year.
Sure, yeah.
And the amount of data, I mean, you're a motoring man, so you would appreciate this. In 3 days of a Formula One race, practice, qualifying, and the race, maybe 6 hours, 22 cars over 6 hours, they're generating 240 terabytes of data.
Terrifying.
Which is, to set that in context, the entire US Library of Congress has 230 terabytes of data. And 22 cars over 3 days are generating 240 terabytes of data. And this is 2016. By now, they're probably at 500 terabytes of data.
Right.
The point I'm making is data and the richness of data and the value of information is growing in leaps and bounds. So yes, there are going to be cities, there are going to be regions that are going to be in some sort of a data shadow or have challenges with, but what we don't have today, very likely we will have a year from now. So I think there is confidence that these shadow areas will get filled, and then you will truly be able to make the kinds of journeys that you have. And many cities, we're already talking about 5G rollout in many cities.
Sure.
And
sure.
so in a 5G environment, this kind of stuff is rather trivial to accomplish.
Okay.
And the last and very important aspect of the framework was the P in the chip framework. And the P stands for personalization. I mean, we live in a society today that has come to expect to be served uniquely.
Yes.
I want my food exactly the way I want it. I want my cell phones or my laptop to be configured exactly the way I want it. And so there is, this is a generation that has come to expect that they can have solutions customized.
And why can't they? They
Exactly.
should be able to, right?
Exactly.
So this is all in your book.
Yes.
Can I read your book, or is it terribly clever and
Oh,
written
no,
for academics?
No. We took a challenge, one, to make sure that this was a book that would have global appeal.
Good.
So this has got to be something that somebody in Asia would find as interesting to read as somebody in North America. The second challenge we had was the moment we expanded to mobility, the audience, the target audience for the book, were as wide as people who are policymakers in government,
right.
urban planners.
Everybody moves, right?
Exactly.
Everybody moves.
So I hope you will validate my statement that the book is easily readable.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know. Venkat, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.
Thank you.